I'm Brooke, a MeatRx coach, and I'm here today with Laura Spath, who's going to share her personal story with Carnivore. Hi, Laura, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Brooke.
Oh, thanks so much for taking the time to share with us your personal journey through the ins and outs of diet and into carnivore. And so let's just get started. What brought you to the carnivore diet?
I say I discovered carnivore through my husband usually because he hated vegetables so much. But we had kind of gone down this path together of looking for weight loss. I was kind of at an all-time high of my weight. I was 263 pounds and was pretty miserable health-wise. At the time, a little over 2 years ago, I was seeing a specialist about my gallbladder, was having some issues. I was talking to a colorectal surgeon about some issues I was having there, and then trying to have some repairs done on my intestines. I was having a lot of gynecological issues and infections, and just a lot of things were going wrong on top of the fact that I was, 263 pounds. And I had tried diets, a lot of diets before. I had spent a lot of time, yo-yo dieting. I was always really good at losing 20 pounds. And then after I lost 20 pounds, I always felt like I deserved a cheat meal after losing that 20 pounds, and then would typically never get back on track again. I'm not somebody who could have a cheat meal on a Friday and then start eating good again on Saturday. That usually would roll into a full weekend. And then Monday I would try to get back on track again, usually make it till like Tuesday or Wednesday. And then kind of every week was this like, well, I might as well wait till Monday again. So I spent, 10 years essentially feeling like I was in this constant state of like losing or gaining pretty dramatically. And I would lose 20, gain 30, lose 20, gain 40, and then kind of topped out. Having kids, I was able to lose some of the weight after I had my daughter, who's 6 now, with low carb diet, just doing like I guess dirty keto, you'd call it, right? A lot of Quest bars, a lot of low carb tortillas, and a lot of things like that. So I lost maybe 50 pounds after her. Again, had a cheat day, and then slowly just kind of gained it all back. Got pregnant with my son, gained quite a bit of weight during that time. And then after I had my son, who's 4 now, I really never lost the weight. I just didn't want to deal with the stress of trying to breastfeed and then go on a diet at the same time. That was kind of my excuse of, well, I need a lot of calories, so I guess I can keep eating all this junk. Go ahead.
Were you keto then for like a few years?
I wasn't. I mean, I would do keto maybe like for a week or a month or something, but certainly never of any, and nothing consistent at all. I just knew that some version of like cutting out sugars and junk food was going to help me lose weight. And, you can't eat bread and potatoes. So I didn't know that it was keto or didn't know about keto at the time. I just knew like you have to cut out all the junk food and sugar. So I would do that when I was trying to be good. But it usually never lasted very long. So I finally topped out. It was the beginning of March, or kind of middle of March. My son was going to be 2 in April, and I weighed more than I did with him than when I went into labor with him. So, I was like, well, not only is he 2 and I haven't lost the baby weight, but I've gained back everything that the initial what you lose just from having the kid, right? Like I don't even have a baby, and I'm heavier now than I am when I went into labor. So those are all those things, plus the health issues, were kind of a wake-up call to me. And then in March 2 years ago, I started what was keto at the time. Everybody was doing keto. It was kind of when the boom first started. And so I started keto, but it was the Quest bars and low carb tortilla keto. And thankfully this time pretty quickly, I cut out a lot of all the keto processed foods, and the keto treats, and then got down to really just like meat and vegetables, some salads, some nuts were really hard to give up. And then my husband Chris discovered carnivore, and he just decided that's something he was going to do. And I thought he was crazy, right? I was the one convincing him to like eat raw spinach leaves every day as a snack because it had to be good for him. And he did it just to like get me to shut up. And so over time, he just stayed strict carnivore. And within a few weeks, because I work full time and he stays home with the kids, he was cooking us dinners. And so he was just cooking meat only for a while. And I just was kind of loving it. I had broke through a weight loss stall that I was experiencing. I was feeling great. And I finally, at the end of a week or so of doing carnivore with him, I decided to have a big taco salad, which was just like meat and cheese and guacamole and then a bunch of lettuce. And just how bloated and terrible I felt after eating that salad, and how kind of messed up my digestive system was at that point, made me realize that maybe he wasn't so crazy. And, you know, I started listening to some of the podcasts that he was recommending and kind of finding my own path. I started finding women who were carnivore. And I think that was the big turning point for me. Was this wasn't like the bro diet of weightlifters who are eating steaks all the time. There's actually women that are doing this and losing weight, and I can do this as well. And so that was a big motivator for me, and kind of what made me buy into it. And so that I just decided to give it a try, and that's been 2 years now. You know, I lost the majority of my weight doing carnivore, some fasting, and then have spent the last year and a half almost really just trying to figure out like, what does maintenance look like for me? And I've had some, you know, I've stayed carnivore for the last year and a half, but I still have some struggles with emotional eating, with stress eating. It's just kind of that like mindless boredom eating for no reason when you're not hungry. So I'm still kind of figuring out how to break a lot of those habits, but for the most part, you know, it's been really solid. A couple of rough months here and there, especially recently with everything that's been going on in the world, has been more stressful, and the adjustment's been harder. But right now I'm feeling great. I'm kind of getting back to where I was my leanest, and working on getting back to feeling my best. And I'm in a good place right now, and it's kind of all just from carnivore.
That's awesome. Now, did you find the medical issues just sort of falling away as time went on, as losing the weight and stuff?
Oh, absolutely. So a lot of my, you know, I was having some chronic yeast infections before, and that went away completely. My gallbladder attacks that I was having, which were gallstones that they said I was going to have my gallbladder removed, just stopped. And so I really haven't followed up and to see if I needed that taken care of, because all that pain and all those issues completely stopped. All my digestive issues stopped, like my chronic, you know, years and years of digestive issues and hemorrhoids and all those major unpleasantness completely stopped. And so all that stuff has really just, my, you know, A1C was getting high. I wasn't considered diabetic, but I was considered pre-diabetic. And so that's completely gone down, and that's been completely reversed. And everything has just been, you know, completely healed.
And now it's been how long?
So it's been 2 years since I've been carnivore. I started keto about a little over 2 years ago in March of 2018. And so I spent the first couple months, like it was, I don't know the exact date that I started carnivore, because it was a much more gradual, like we cut out the processed foods, then we cut out the vegetables. And then the last thing that I was just digging my claws into was those macadamia nuts, right? And I had to cut those out eventually. So there was kind of just slowly cutting things out over time, but it's definitely been I remember we went on vacation kind of 2 years ago at this time, and we're just eating meat around then.
Yeah, that sounds like my calendar too. I could totally relate to that. I remember the first little bit of keto, my hair was falling out, and carnivore stopped.
Yeah. I went through a lot of that, right? A lot of my hair was falling out. And I don't track macros now, and I don't track any of that stuff, but I was when I was keto, because I was so concerned about doing it right and having the correct ratios. Well, I look back now, and I was eating like 1,000 calories a day, and I was eating 30 to 50 grams of protein a day. And it's like, no wonder your hair was falling out. You were under eating, and you weren't eating enough protein. I also, you know, lost my cycle for a few months around that same time. And it wasn't until I started eating fattier meats, eating more calories, that I got my period back. And I know that's something a lot of women are concerned about with fasting and with carnivore in general. And I lost mine for a few months. It was a really frustrating time to think like I'm doing everything right, but what's going wrong? But a lot of that is too just the dramatic weight loss that I had, and then also just under eating for a while for those few months definitely caused it to stop. And so once I started eating more, eating enough fat and eating enough, you know, protein, and my weight stabilized, then that came back, and things, I still do fasting. I know that's for some people that's a concern, and I still do fasting and don't have any, and I'm still very strict carnivore, and I don't have any issues with hormones or with my cycle of any kind.
Yeah, it's great. Once you're really finally fat adapted, fasting is I mean,
Yeah.
life feels more energizing to me sometimes, just not to eat all day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when you, so was the weight really dramatic when you just started eating meat?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I definitely, when you're 260 pounds and you cut out the pints of ice cream that you were eating daily and the pizza and all the junk food, you know, I lost 30 pounds, I think, my first month, and that was maybe technically keto. But it was really just because I cut out all the junk that I was eating, and that was the easy part. I think that switching to carnivore, I had been stalled out for a little while with keto. I lost, 30, 40 pounds doing that initial meat and vegetables and nuts and cheese. And then at some point I just couldn't lose weight anymore and couldn't figure out why. Well, then cutting out stuff like nuts and vegetables, like there goes another 20 pounds pretty rapidly. And then it continued, it kept continuing and it kept continuing. And that's the difference. Was I've lost weight in the past before, but I never could stick to it emotionally before. And I also could never just keep losing before, because at some point you're eating, what you're eating is causing you to have some stalls there. So that was a lot of the difference for me. I think that I had a point there. Now I forget it. I lost my train of thought. So I think,
About the steady decline of weight.
yeah, I think that, I'm sure I would not have lost this much weight if it wasn't for carnivore.
Yeah, because it's so fortifying. So you can, as you're losing weight, you're also getting fortified.
Yes. And I remember what I was going to say now. I think I have a hard time saying, like, I lost 20 pounds on my first month of carnivore, right? Or I lost 30 pounds in the month when I started keto, because I hate for people to compare to that, because there's so much context. I didn't have a lot of, I mean, the health issues that I had were issues, but they weren't like a thyroid issue. They weren't like a hormone issue, things that, cause people to retain weight. I also was really large, and I was coming from this like years and years of processed food, junk food diet. So like cutting that stuff out, you are going to have a dramatic weight loss. And I would hate for somebody to get frustrated with carnivore, or to be thinking it's not working for them because they didn't lose 20 pounds in the first month like Laura did. There's a lot of context that you have to put into that. And so you can't compare to that. And so I do hate giving people exact numbers, because I just don't want it. I hope that it's encouraging, but I also don't, if it's not happening for you, I don't want you to be discouraged for that.
Well, then let's talk about the other aspects of it, because the weight loss is a huge aspect in your situation. No pun intended. But there's these other aspects of just getting stronger and healthier and cleaner, and and your mood stabilizing. Or what were those things like for you? Did you see those differences too?
I used to always think that I was just a high-strung person and a stressed out person, and that's just who I was. And I didn't realize, I thankfully have not been somebody who's dealt with depression, but I definitely have dealt with anxiety. And I didn't realize that. Like, I had no idea that was something until it goes away. You don't realize like how predominant it was in your life, or just like how high strung and snappy you were. And so I think that was a big change for me, just in my mood and my mentality. My hair and my skin and just my overall, digestive system has been one of the biggest unseen things. Is just being able to like have normal bowel movements is the thing that I celebrate the most, and not have to deal with, chronic constipation. When I was doing that keto, we talked about like my hair was kind of all falling out and my hormones were bad. This is all now grown back. This is a year of hair growth. And this is all grown back now since, I call it my, like this, all of this is my, one of these days I'm going to get it chopped and even off, but this is all my new hair growth since I switched to strict carnivore in the last year and a half. For when my hair was falling out from under eating and not having enough protein during that time. So lots of good improvement there. I've always been somebody who's dealt with chronic adult acne too. And I know it's just from the processed foods and sugars. And even now, for the most part on carnivore, completely great, no issues whatsoever. Over March and April, I was eating a lot of meats, processed meats, cheeses, salamis, pepperonis, summer sausage, pork rinds, tons and tons of cheese, and even some nuts. And that caused my face to just explode. And so I can tell a big difference. I get like this beard of zits when I'm eating too many processed foods. And so once I got back on track in May and now in June, and have been back on my routine of fasting and just meat, my skin is completely cleared up, and that's been going so much better.
Oh, nice. So do you sometimes do you fall into the nut, sometimes you fall off the road into the nuts?
I would say in the last 2 years of being carnivore, I could probably say maybe twice. So I don't want to say it's all the time thing, but like definitely over March. And then I think last summer, right, we came back from vacation, and then I just kind of went on like a little nut treat time. And so, but I got all swollen, my belly gets all big, like I'm pregnant, and it's so crazy. So it's definitely not a regular thing. But you know, the sniffing the jars of peanut butter and turning into like taking a scoop with your finger is, you know, I went through that a little bit in March, but that's been a rarity for sure. And I can tell instantly, my skin goes crazy, my digestive system goes crazy, I get super bloated. So usually I learn my lesson, and that kind of convinces me to stay away for about a year.
Yeah, nuts are definitely an addictive thing for me. I have to stay away from nuts. Scary. They're scary.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit different than other times, or quite a bit different than other times you talked about when you lose weight. You didn't also see these other things happening.
Right. Definitely. I think before it was just you lose the 20 pounds, you lose the 50 pounds, but I was still dealing with, you know, a lot of the same digestive issues before. My acne really never resolved before. And, you know, I was never really saw a difference in my blood sugar before, because I think I was still eating the same foods, just less of them in a sense.
Yeah, so that's a good takeaway for people who are, you know, struggling with focusing just on weight loss, that, you know, to switch the focus to the other positive aspects that are changing.
Right. And I know that, you know, not everybody agrees with it, but for me, fasting has been the biggest part about weight loss. Like, you know, when people ask me, like, I'm not losing weight, why am I not losing weight? My two questions to them are like, what are you eating and how often are you eating? And those are the two things that, like, there has to be something, even if you have some sort of issue, if you're 100% strict, there has to be a food that you're eating or the times that you're eating that are causing you to not lose weight. And so those are my two levers. If I'm not losing weight, I have to look at what am I eating? Maybe it's cheese and meats and stuff. Like around Christmas time, we usually kind of enjoy like a little charcuterie board with meats and cheeses and stuff as a treat on Christmas. And if I let that extend from Christmas to New Year's, right, then I'm going to have some issues with my weight there. But so it's what are you eating? And then it's also just how often are you eating? If you're having constant snacks at night, and even though it's pork rinds and cheese, it still could be holding you back from your weight loss.
Yeah, the frequency is a big deal. You know, thinking about insulin as opposed to thinking about calories.
Right.
And spiking that insulin.
And I've never been somebody to track calories. I don't know the calories that I eat. I don't know my fat to protein ratio, but I do know how often I eat, and I know what that does for me. So that's been the biggest lever that I've used.
So when you started fasting, this was well into like a year into when you were completely fat adapted, or did you start fasting earlier?
I think a few months in. I mean, you know, 2 years ago when we were kind of at carnivore at the same time, right when I switched to carnivore, that's when I found that one meal a day worked for me. And so I started doing one meal a day pretty much the same time as I was carnivore. I was probably fat adapted because I had been keto for a couple months before that. So it wasn't super dramatic, but just naturally I found if I ate a lot of meat at lunch, I just wasn't hungry for dinner. And then you wake up the next day and I wasn't used to eating breakfast. So that kind of made it where the next thing I knew, I was naturally just eating lunch every day, and that worked. It was a few months later after that when I tried doing like a 48-hour fast or a 36-hour fast for the first time. So that was maybe 6 months into everything before I tried that. And I don't think that that's something people should try to do right away. You know, there's the phrase that fasting is a muscle. And so if you've never done 24 hours before, you certainly shouldn't be trying to do 48 or 72. But now, because I do 48s pretty regularly, it's not as hard for me to just switch it up and go to 72.
And you find when you do fasting, your energy doesn't, I'm guessing that your energy doesn't drop a lot during the fasting, which is really indicative to the body being able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've been able to tell a difference when I've been much leaner. Like I'm not at my absolute lowest weight right now, but when I was, it was a lot harder for me to fast because I didn't have a lot of excess body fat for me to be using. You still can fast then, but you might experience things like lower energy, or you're going to be super cold because your body is a lot thinner. Right now, I still, especially earlier on, but and now I still have plenty of stored body fat right around my stomach and my love handles for my body to use for fuel. And so I'm not, I don't get those energy dips because my body's still eating.
And when you do fast, are you drinking salt water? Are you using more salt?
You know, for the first year and a half, even 100%, I would do a 24-hour fast even, or a 40, and I was salt water. And then it got to a point where maybe it wasn't until I hit past 24 hours that I added the salt and potassium water. And then now I've gotten to the point where I really don't even think about it. If I got a headache or something, or if I wasn't feeling great, then I would add that. But over time, your body almost just learns to use its stored electrolytes more readily, and kind of regulate that yourself. And so now I can fast. I actually am going to eat after we're done with this call today, and I'm finishing up an almost 96-hour fast. And I haven't used any salt water this time. So I don't recommend that again for people in the beginning, because you definitely will need those electrolytes and you might feel pretty terrible without them. But at this point, if I don't feel bad, I'm not going to use it.
And do you ever get Charlie horses, the cramps, like leg cramps and stuff when you're in bed?
I don't. When I was at my thinnest and still fasting, I was getting them. And so that's kind of when there were several things that were going on. I was like, all right, well, maybe you need to like eat more, chill out a little bit. I think for a minute I got like a little too thin, and that was part of maybe the contribution to my my hormones. It was right around that same time when my period stopped, for all those kind of combination of reasons that I had mentioned. And so I was having some Charlie horses. I took some magnesium, but then they kind of went away, and I really haven't taken anything for that since then.
So tell us what you eat now.
Mostly steaks. I mean, beef prices are a little higher right now. So I would say in the last month, I've had more variety in my diet than I've had in the last 2 years. You know, if I had my way, I would eat steaks, ribeyes every day that I do eat. And then, you know, maybe as a change, I'd go to In-N-Out and get some plain burger patties. But In-N-Out's about the only place that I care to eat plain burger patties from. It's the only place that to me tastes good plain. But right now we've been eating a lot more pork. So some like, you know, pork loin chops, or we've been doing a lot more pork shoulder steaks, some crispy pork belly.
And how do you do with pork? Do you notice any difference?
I feel great, actually. I maybe don't feel as satisfied long term. Like I wouldn't be able to do anything longer than 24 hours if I just ate pork most recently. So if I eat pork, I need to know that I'm eating the next day, and I want to make sure I'm getting some kind of beef in the next day. We do mix in some eggs occasionally, and maybe some chicken as a budget saver, but I would rather eat some chicken wings and some beef than try to eat, like I could never just eat a bunch of chicken breasts or something. That wouldn't be satisfying to me. I would rather keep it to like a little bit of keep the beef in there, and then maybe mix in some eggs. Instead of eating 2 ribeyes, I would eat 1 ribeye and some eggs, or some shrimp, or some chicken wings, or something else that would be a little more to help with the prices. But I mean, there's some things to me that are also worth the sacrifice, and eating steak and eating beef is one of those. I'd rather do that than, you know, buy other things.
Yeah, what is it about beef? It's really, for me as well, really no other meat calms me and relaxes and satisfies me, and then beef. It's amazing to me.
I also just don't want to eat ground beef either. Like that does not sound appealing to me. And so I know I've done it before, where especially for like budget reasons, I've eaten ground beef and eggs for a period of time, or bacon and ground beef and eggs. But that's a good thing to take to work when you have to microwave leftovers, because nobody likes a microwave steak. But for the most part, I'm not going to eat that if I'm home. I'm either going to eat steak, or I'm just not going to eat, or pork or something else, or I'd rather just not eat.
Yeah. Did you have cravings like liver and stuff? Were you ever eating organs?
No.
No.
I mean, it's terrible to say that I've never even eaten them, and that just doesn't sound good to me. And I'm probably a big wimp to say that, but like, I just doesn't sound good. I'm too scared. I can't do it.
Yeah, I heard Kelly say something. She used a term, bougie carnivore, and I thought, yeah, that sounds great. Bougie carnivore. I just eat steaks every day. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea. Um, so let's talk about fat because that's a big thing in the carnivores these days. Fat, the amounts of fat or protein go towards protein or go towards fat, and I've had to tweak it myself. So what's your trip with it?
You know what? I don't know the ratios. Like, I don't know the ratio, fat to protein ratio of a ribeye because it could be so different based on the marbling, the surrounding fat, how it's trimmed, and then also how much of that fat you eat. I do know that before, when I was having, a lot of issues, right? Like before my hormone issues and stuff over a year ago, um, I was eating ribeyes, but I was trimming off every single piece of like seeable fat on those. I was crazy. And so I just didn't have a taste for it yet. And that was another difference was I started crisping up that fat a lot more, making sure it was cooked better. I'd throw it in the air fryer when I was done with my steak or crisp it up in a pan to make sure I was eating all that fat. So I don't focus now on adding extra fat to things. I don't usually eat I just don't necessarily worry about that, but I do just make sure I eat the fat that's on the steaks that I'm eating, and that's made a big difference for me as far as kind of balancing out a lot of those things. But I've never really known what my fat to protein ratios are, and I've never really played around with it other than just saying like, hey, maybe you should not cut off all the fat. Like, how about just eat it and you'll be fine. And that did make a big difference. Just making sure I was eating all the fat on the meat.
Have you ever been one of those, adding butter to steaks? Was that ever part of your deal?
You know what? I did for the first time ever a couple weeks ago, and it tasted great. Like somebody suggested this brand of butter. It was a sea salt whipped butter, and it tasted, I mean, amazing. I've maybe tried it in the past with like some plain Costco butter, and it just wasn't that good, so I never did it again. But for the first time ever, I like added some steak or butter to a steak, and I did it more for a flavor reasons, not to like try to get more fat in. I just did it because it tasted good.
Yeah, it does taste good. So what's dairy? What's your relationship with dairy? Do you use dairy?
I don't drink coffee, so I don't use cream. So that kind of makes it easier. I just don't like coffee. And I use maybe butter if I was cooking some eggs or something, but that's kind of it. Cheese is the biggest one for me. I could eat cheese from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to bed. And if I allow myself to do that, I gain weight, my skin breaks out. I have a lot of issues. If I can keep the cheese out, and I can almost eat as much meat as I want in my one meal as long as I keep the cheese out. I try now to treat cheese like, a holiday food or vacation food, or I also am fine, like if I wanted to put some feta cheese on a steak or dip some, have some goat cheese on my steak, those things are also great if I'm keeping it within the confines of my meal. Maybe even like some halloumi occasionally on the side. The problem I get into is when I try to eat cheese as an appetizer while I'm cooking, and then while the kids are eating dinner at night, I start eating their cheese, and then pepperonis, and then after they go to bed, I grab some more cheese. Like I could eat a whole pack of string cheese easily in a day. As long as I'm not doing that, I'm fine. So once I realize I've been doing that for too often, then I usually say like, okay, no cheese for 30 days. Like I'm currently doing no cheese for June, because March and April, I had way too much. May, I cut it back a little bit, but I still wasn't getting my skin cleared up as much as I wanted to. So for June, I'm just going a month with no cheese. We leave for vacation on July 4th and are gonna go stay with some family for a couple weeks. I will eat cheese while we're there with my meal. We're gonna have a lot of burger patties, and most of the time I don't like burger patties without some kind of cheese on them. So I will probably eat cheese over those couple weeks and then maybe come home and cut it out again.
Yeah, so you use the cheese as a condiment kind of, and then until it sort of gets in the way and starts to take over. It's so tasty.
Yeah, I try to use it more as a treat, or something to like feel like I'm splurging or celebrating, and not keep it in my everyday life.
Because it's great to actually be able to use as a condiment, as a treat.
Yeah.
So and so you're so grateful that you don't have to eliminate it completely like some people have to.
Yes.
And you said you do eat eggs a little bit, so but you don't eat them too much, or do you
Not
find
very
that?
often, more just because they're not as satisfying. You know, if I eat like 4 eggs and bacon, I think that's I looked it up one time because I couldn't realize, like, why were you so hungry? You just had 4 eggs and a bunch of bacon, and it was like 800 calories. Like, that's certainly not enough to sustain me for that 24-hour period. I travel some for my job, or as of before Corona, I was traveling a lot for my job, and I can't usually get the volume of meat that I want at a time, especially in restaurants. You're going to be paying like tremendous amounts. So I do a lot of eggs when I'm traveling because I know that I can usually get them for more affordable. Most burger places will have eggs on the side, or I'll end up eating 2 meals then because I just can't eat enough in my one meal at a restaurant, usually to kind of last me for 24 hours. So I try to do like some eggs and bacon at the hotel or at a restaurant before I end up eating lunch then.
So you're able to manage carnivore, sounds pretty easily, even though you're traveling for work.
Yeah, I think, fasting helps for that too. I don't, even if it's intermittent fasting, right? If I have a 4-hour flight or a 5-hour flight to New York from Phoenix, you know, we see a lot of questions in these message boards or Facebook groups saying, like, what can I eat on my plane? Like, the answer is don't eat anything. And being able to just not eat for half the day while you're flying is really nice. Usually I'll take that as an opportunity to like do a 40-hour fast, but if that's not something you're comfortable with, you still don't have to eat while you're on the plane. I mean, I have taken cold steaks on a plane before, I'm not gonna lie, and like eating them, halfway through the flight, I pull out my carne asada or pull out my cold ribeye. So I've done that. But for the most part, it makes an easy fasting day. I try to plan ahead. Sometimes I travel by myself, and that obviously makes it easy. I could just go to Wendy's, or I could go to a steakhouse and eat. If I'm traveling with a large group of people, which I do sometimes, I try to, plan ahead, call the restaurants ahead of time so I'm not kind of asking a million questions in front of all my coworkers and my boss. And, I maybe even bring my own food at that point. I've eaten, like, we had to go to this dinner before, and it was a Italian place, pasta place, and I knew there was nothing there that I could eat. So I actually just drove through Carl's Jr. drive through and got some burger patties and ate those on my way to the dinner we were supposed to go to. And then with that many people around, nobody even noticed that I didn't eat.
Good job. Very good job. I know it's fast food restaurants are, which I never used to use before, like such a godsend now on
Right.
carnivore. Just get meat. It's so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cheap.
And it's cheap. Yeah. Otherwise, I would think that you're traveling and you're taking these flights, and then you maybe having to hit a restaurant. You're probably having to eat a smaller amount of food,
Yes.
um, sort of like a diet trip, because all of a sudden you're eating just like a steak.
Right.
Um,
I'm eating,
but
one 16-ounce steak, which is really expensive, even at a place like a Longhorn or an Outback. Like, it's so expensive for that, like 12, 14, 16-ounce steak.
exactly. Um, well, that's why fasting is so convenient. That's great
Yes.
that you've been able to work it into your life so well.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned a little bit back, and I want to sort of come back to this about what carnivore has for women, or I want to talk about specifically what carnivore has for women, because it's fantastic that there's so many, strong bros out there leading the way with carnivore. That's really awesome. But there's so many aspects about I think about women, and especially women are the child bearers and really needing nutrient dense food. So I want to talk a little bit about what you think carnivore has given you for strength as a woman.
I mean, I think there's a tremendous sense of community out here right now as far as women in carnivore. And I'm excited to say that right now, I think people publicly sharing their journeys on carnivore, I think because women are probably more open and more proactive with social media, especially. But if you look at like YouTube channels, like carnivore YouTube channels, there's many more women that are sharing than there are men for the most part. I think, you have like Sean and Dr. Saladino, but I don't even know too many more men than that even have these like pretty substantial YouTube channels. But yeah, from a woman's perspective, you have Kelly and Sarah and Caitlin and me, and there's, you know, there's a lot of women that are sharing their stories, and we all do it so differently. I think that's one of the great things too, to see so many different versions of carnivore that are being done and shared. And I think Instagram is the same way. There's a few, you know, carnivore dudes, but for the most part, the people that are the most active and sharing openly on social media, there's just so many great women that are sharing. And I think that gives people so much confidence to be able to come to this. And just, you know, from a health perspective, like I've tried a vegan diet before, and right now my skin is the best it's ever been. My hormones are the best that they've ever been. My digestive system, my, you know, just aesthetically, right? Like my body is the best that it's ever been doing carnivore. And I think that makes such a difference, hopefully, to a lot of women that are out there that are looking for some sort of encouragement, that you don't have to be eating. You know, I spent a lot of years trying to lose weight, eating salads and chicken breasts, and never being able to sustain it because, or like constantly falling off the wagon and eating something because I was hungry and I was deprived. And so, you know, there's something, it's really scary, I'm not gonna lie, to go to a dinner with a lot of people and order 2 steaks, or order a steak and a side of a burger patty, or a steak and a, you know, a couple burger patties and some eggs, and that can feel very judgy from people, especially when I was starting and was heavier. But knowing there's so many women out here that are doing the same thing, and it gives me encouragement to see so many other women that are dealing with the same things that I am. Especially too when it comes to feeding kids, right? You know, we've changed our kids' diets quite a bit, and when I see other women that are doing the same thing, it's really encouraging to me, and I don't feel as bad sending my kids to school with, you know, cold eggs and cold bacon for their lunch when the other kids are eating Lunchables and peanut butter and jelly every day.
Good deal. Yeah, very good. Can I ask a little bit also about relationships? Because I think that carnivore and relationships are just, it's a huge thing, relationships. Yeah. When both people are carnivore, I just see so much improvements on mood and patience and stuff. So what's it like for you guys?
You know, it's been the biggest blessing that Chris and I are doing this together. I say all the time, but I don't know if I would have made it this far without him, or if he would have made it this far. You know, if one of us was eating ice cream regularly, it would be so much harder. And I know there are so many people out there, you know, women and people in general, who are doing this and don't have everybody in their household on board. And that there are some dark days where I'm just saying, if there was Snickers bar in the pantry, like, I don't know if I could have been as strong as I am now. But I have somebody who's going to talk me off the ledge. I have somebody who doesn't keep those things in our house. And it's, you know, I'm not going to go to the store and buy it and deal with all that. But I'm certainly, you know, it keeps me out of the looking around in the pantry or having those like stressful moments of trying to fight myself off sometimes. That makes such a difference. I think it definitely brings us together. Early on, you know, Chris was going out of town. He had to teach me how to cook my own steak, and that was kind of a fun thing. And now I like to say that I do it better than he does, or like to teach other people to cook steaks. But we've had a lot of fun bonding. One of us will listen to a podcast and tell the other one, like, oh, you got to listen to this, or you got to check this out. And that's been really fun for us to be able to share things that we're learning, things that are exciting to us. It makes things like vacations and eating out, like we're on the same page for a lot of things. And I mean, I think I notice a big difference just in like, you know, PMS. Like I don't have, there'll be sometimes now when I'll start my period and I wasn't cranky for 4 days before that. And I wasn't kind of a disaster, and I wasn't like all of a sudden super emotional, because I'm not dealing with those symptoms anymore. And that certainly makes things easy on your marriage when that happens.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure. That's really nice. It's good to hear that. So what are your ongoing goals in carnivore, or I shouldn't say that, in like physical goals? Do you have some physical goals?
I mean, right now, I definitely am trying to get back to my leanest and see if that's really where I want to be, and kind of looking at what is the right weight for me long term, and then essentially like how can I maintain that. I think that's the biggest thing. I've spent I spent the first almost year of maintenance like solid. The scale never fluctuated more than about 5 pounds. And then since Christmas, things have been a lot more up and down for me, and I had gained some weight. I lost a lot of that in May and now in June, but I still am heavier than I want to be. So that's my first goal, is to get back to that. And then once I'm back again, it's what's the balance? Like, where can I comfortably, happily, mentally sustain myself moving forward? You feel like you've kicked a lot of these old habits until some stress and triggers and emotional eating comes out. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe now I'm not as like all together as I thought I was. I still got some like issues to work out. So I think realizing that I gained weight, but I'm feeling stronger this time because I know why I did. And I now it's not about like I gained weight, I failed. It's okay, I gained weight. We've now acknowledged like why that happened. I know why it happened. I can, hopefully be stronger next time to avoid some of those triggers, to avoid, a lot of the things that caused it, and do better next time. So that's, I just hope to maintain my weight and then also continue this better relationship with food and continue to heal that, addictive nature with food, the emotional eating and this mindless eating, and just find a way to learn to cope better with a lot of things and not use food for that.
That sounds good. I mean, when you were explaining the way you gained weight over the years, it sounded like it was like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that you're losing, it's probably also like this.
Right.
So,
definitely.
And at the same time, probably getting better bone mass and teeth mineralization,
Yeah.
and endocrine system strengthening and neurological strengthening. So sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. I feel stronger every time, when I'm in a good place, when I'm dialed in, when I'm eating steaks, when I'm doing one meal a day, when I'm in this, I feel completely invincible. And so I love to just kind of maintain that feeling for a really long time.
Sounds great, Laura. Thanks. And I'm so glad you're sharing it on social media. Like you said, all the women sharing on social media, it's really great. When you answered that question and pointed out how many people were sharing, I realized, oh, it's a huge help, a huge help. Yeah, thanks. Well, it's nice to know that you're in the Carniverse with me.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been great.
Yeah. So carry on, and hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Yes,
in
definitely.
The real world.
Yeah, let's get some conferences back together, and I can't wait to be traveling again and see everybody in real life.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.